In 250 kilos of cocaine. There's another cocaine seized here comprising of over 250 kilos of cocaine that was destined to go to Europe. All these rooms are filled of cocaine, marijuana, and heroin.
One of the earliest to use cocaine was Errol Fabian.
Cocaine in Trinidad started like the early 80s, but it wasn't very easily obtained, and it cost a lot of money in those days. And in those days it was the powder form where you used to snort. Later though, like 84, 85, people had discovered freebasing and making the crack. The powder form, the cheapest you could get was $50. But with the crack, you could get $5 worth of crack. So then everybody started using the crack cocaine, and it just pervaded. It just took over. It spread through the whole society. And then I was involved in an incident where I hurt my children because I took like the earrings and locked them up in the house to go and sell that to get the money, to get the drug. And then when I reached home, I realized like I really have a problem, but at this stage it was too far gone for me to do anything about it.
As Chadee's cocaine flowed onto the streets of Trinidad, the crime rate began to rise sharply. The number of murders and violent assaults doubled in the 5 years up to 1985.
It's about this time the cocaine addicts and them start coming out looking for simple little things to steal. They don't steal big, you know. They take all your pots, flower pots, any little tools you have outside, buy the cocaine, smoke that cocaine. For the next hour they relax, and then they come out again and go to the next house.
Cocaine continues its grip on Trinidad. It's estimated that 60% of all crime committed on these streets is drug-related. Tonight, the police have been told that a burglar has been on the prowl.
Coming towards me, and it's only until he came on, then he stopped and he ran back towards the back. He was wearing these yellow shorts, which I cannot understand.
Yellow shorts?
Yellow shorts, and he was bareback. I didn't see a head or anything because I was frightened, and I just pulled back in and I locked the door. There was an intruder at the back of the yard, and as I opened my door to come out, the motion sensor came on, the lights came on, and he turned and ran. I am very, very frightened at this point because this is the first time that I have my own apartment, and this is very scary.
That intruder most likely is a cocaine addict looking for something small to steal, to go and sell, to buy cocaine.
By the early 80s, Chadee was acting as a main conduit for cocaine between the South American cartels and the drug users of Europe and America. His success had earned him the jealousy of rival gangs. He built a lavish new home in the village of Piparo.
These premises are the premises of Dole Chadee. He built this massive premises over several years in the early 1980s. And it's from this premises that he conducted most of his business.
His new home in the center of one of Trinidad's poorest areas cost £1 million. He lived here with his wife and 4 children, protected by elaborate security measures.
He tried to organize his house in a very secure way, in that the windows of the house, there was an inner shield of steel, so that his rivals, even if they got over the fence, he and his family could hide inside the premises, and they would not have been able to get in to harm himself and his family. So he actually built a fortress to protect himself and his family from rivals.
Dole Chadee was a rather interesting, almost intriguing character. He was a hero of sorts in and around the village where he lived. Because like every mafia don, you not just intimidate the people around you, but you keep them happy to a point. So he would provide goods and services, right? He'd provide meals and as he himself said, lots of funerals. He'd help bury people, maybe killed by his gang, but he'd help with the funerals and so. So he did help a lot of people in the community, and there was a certain respect for him in a very curious way. They knew he was a drug lord, but yet they held him in some esteem.
He helped schools, he helped poor people, he helped private school, kindergartens, he helped everybody that I knew. He helped a whole village of people, which is thousands of people. He helped having food in their pot and whatnot. He helped me. Every month he used to give me $1,000 in goods to maintain my family. He helped my children go to school and all these things.
He also claimed to be a devout Hindu and built an extravagant temple decorated with £500,000 worth of artifacts imported from India. Here he would invite favored guests and Hindu priests to pray.
Mr. Chadee, being born a Hindu, and anyone needed assistance in carrying on Hindu activities, he was always willing. If someone should have, let's say, a marriage, some people might be poor, and they would seek him out. He would say, okay, I will support you. And he will give generously also to the bride's family.
But by 1985, Chadee was also earning a reputation as the island's most infamous gangster, and the police made repeated attempts to stop him.
We entered these premises on numerous occasions by climbing over the fence. On 2 or 3 occasions, we actually abseiled by helicopter and entered the premises, where we found caches of money, large quantities of money, sometimes a few $100,000, even on one occasion over $1 million in Trinidad and Tobago. Currency was found in a bedroom. Several occasions he was charged for drug trafficking and possession of drugs offenses.
Several times he was brought to trial, and he was convicted of minor offenses, including the possession of marijuana. But many other charges never made it to court. Chadee had been charged with 15 serious drug and firearms offenses, but these were lost in the judicial system, raising suspicions that Chadee was corrupting policemen and court officials. In 1986, the government held an official inquiry into the burgeoning drug trade. It identified Chadee as a key drug smuggler and claimed he had contacts with 30 police officers, including the island's most senior policeman, the Commissioner, Randolph Burrows. Burrows was the only one of the suspect officers to be arrested and was charged with corruption and drugs offenses. But after a lengthy court case, he was acquitted on all counts.
Dole Chadee was deemed untouchable for quite some time because he corrupted policemen left, right, and center. And policemen in this country are not difficult to be corrupted. You can do it with a few dollars. It used to be a bottle of rum in the old days. It has boiled down to a few dollars now. And he was able to penetrate that whole police system. And that drove even more fear into the hearts of people. They could not get to him because he had this protective armor almost in official circles involving policemen and even some other people in high positions in the legal framework in this country.
Before long, Chadee realized that rivals were about to challenge his authority as the country's leading drug lord. He hired bodyguards who were prepared to kill to protect his empire. Trinidad was about to become a bloodbath. Chadee's worldwide drug empire was growing so fast he needed room to expand. So he seized 100 acres of land from the state and built a new business headquarters a mile away from his £1 million home.
This house was the main house on the estate. It was used as a storage house in terms of when drugs were brought in from Colombia and Venezuela. They would first be brought here. The money would be counted, packaged in plastic bags like the cocaine before they were taken to be concealed in barrels that were buried on this estate.
To keep his empire safe, armed security guards and lookouts watched over the ranch 24 hours a day.
This was the highest room in the main building, and it was a strategic location in terms of being able to be used as a lookout point in case law enforcement officers were to make a surprise raid or criminals would come to try and extort money from him and that type of thing.
Chadee's drug smuggling operation was now at its height, and he had a small army of full-time staff all over the world. He travelled frequently to Britain, where his children attended private school, and where he had secret bank accounts and property investments. Chadee was now a vital link in the chain leading from the Colombian drug cartels to the dealers of Europe and the USA.
Dole had amassed enormous wealth. You saw it in terms of the lifestyle that he portrayed, the lifestyle of a don. He had bought several expensive and exquisite type cars and, having a good time and throwing parties. And Dole saw himself as the local Pablo Escobar, the drug lord of Colombia.
Estimates of his total assets range from 10 to 50 million pounds, though most remains hidden. He ploughed millions of dollars into front companies running coconut estates, citrus groves and teak forests. Some went on land on the outskirts of this village, ironically named Charlieville.
He used these means to conceal his ill-gotten gains, to portray himself as a legitimate businessman.
Meanwhile, his trade was having a dramatic impact on the streets of Trinidad. By 1990, violent assaults had risen by 300% in 10 years.
This street that we are swinging into now, we call it Piper's Alley. Almost everybody on this street smokes cocaine. The females sell their bodies and they smoke their cocaine.
Among those who fell victim to cocaine was Nigel, now a recovering addict.
In no time at all, I lose everything. I start selling out things in my home. I leave my job because I think I was taking too long to get money to smoke, and it brought me to my knees in no time. I lost everything because I just wanted to have, cocaine all the time. There were times out there when I was using, I attempted suicide because I wanted to stop, but I could not stop. There are times out there when I was walking to the pusher man to buy my drugs, and I was crying. I was crying, tears were coming out my because just a few minutes ago I was hungry, and now that I got $10, I'm going to the pusher man to buy cocaine, and I'm crying because I don't want to go, but my body's going because I'm addicted.
Today, almost half the teenagers in Trinidad's juvenile prison are serving time for drug-related crime.
My name is Quincy Cook, and I'm charged for trafficking cocaine and firearm and ammunition. Cocaine is a very serious problem here because the youths growing up today, they're seeing a lot of men outside hustling, looking nice sneakers, nice jeans, and everybody need it.
To me it was easy because since I small I know it, marijuana, cocaine, 2 blocks right there, fast money.
We want it fast, so it's a problem. We sell the cocaine to support our habits.
By the early 1990s, 2/3 of Europe's cocaine was traveling from South America through the islands of the Caribbean. In Trinidad, where cocaine was hardly seen a decade earlier, 2 tons were being imported every month via hundreds of remote swamps and rivers. Chadee's success brought vast wealth, but he still wanted more. He armed his hired killers with weapons smuggled in from South America. Their job was to eliminate rival drug dealers and take over their patch.
He would have his men move in, liquidate whoever was the opponent, and then he'd move his people in and he'd control the area.
When rival gangs fought back, the result was war on the streets of Trinidad. The state responded by setting up a military intelligence unit to keep Chadee under surveillance. The operation lasted for 4 years, gathering information that murders were being carried out at his command.
We targeted him. He committed 21 murders that we were aware of over that period of time. Sounds astounding, but true. Now, these are 21 murders that we are aware of, names that we can put to individuals. The thing is that we are aware that there were others, foreigners, mostly Venezuelans, that we couldn't put a name to those people.
As the turf wars escalated, the murder rate reached epidemic proportions. In 1993, 1 person was killed every 3 days, 133 killings in a country the size of Norfolk. Trinidad had the fastest growing murder rate in the world. One of the victims was a well-known drug dealer, and Chadee was arrested for his murder when the police found 2 witnesses willing to give evidence. But once again, he managed to evade justice. The first witness, Scotty Charles, was shot dead the day before he was due to testify. And when the second witness suddenly retracted his evidence, Chadee walked free from court. He then gave his only interview in 20 years as a major criminal to 2 local journalists.
The first question I asked him was, "Mr. Chadee, are you a killer?" And he said to me, "No." He looked me straight in the eye and he said, "No." I said, "Mr. Chadee, are you a drug pusher?" And he said, "No."
All that remains of the interview today is this cassette copy.
My reputation was given to me from the police. The police is a bad example for the state. They have destroyed me, they have given me that reputation. Could you ask the police if they ever arrested me with any drugs? If they have strong evidence that I'm a drug dealer? So it is the police perception to destroy me.
He sounded so convincing that, somebody interviewing him might tend to believe him because of his humble nature.
Chadee then surprised the reporters by claiming that many policemen had been on his payroll for years.
He gave a lot of information about corrupt policemen who he had dealt with. He said that policemen came to his home and that he offered them bribe money, and that he also knew when the police were coming to raid his home. Mr. Chadee had a lot of big connections in this country. I think he was angry that these same people went against him, and he wanted somebody or anybody to know, look, I pay these people, I have been paying them money, and these people went against me. That's the impression I got.
His admissions appeared to confirm that corrupt officials had protected him for years. Police would raid his home only to find that he'd been tipped off and drugs removed before they got there. 15 serious charges, including cocaine trafficking, had still not come to court 10 years after he was first charged. And in one case, he had been freed when court documents disappeared. They were later discovered during a search of his home.
In Trinidad and Tobago, people were afraid of Chadee, not just because he had a gang of thugs that could just about do anything that he wanted done, but also because he had his tentacles reaching into the police service and one didn't know where else within officialdom.
In 1994, Trinidad was preparing for a crucial election, and with the turf wars between drug gangs at their height, the fight to curtail the power of the drug barons became a vital political issue.
There was a feeling that the government was powerless to deal with the drug trade, and people felt frustrated, helpless, and they felt that virtually there was a state of lawlessness.
Promising to be tough on law and order, the opposition United National Congress Party swept to power. They immediately struck a deal with America, under which patrol boats, helicopters, and radar equipment were donated to Trinidad. In return, the US was allowed unprecedented access to Trinidad's territorial waters to pursue the drug runners flooding American streets with cocaine.
Just picked up a contact which appears to be a power-driven vessel. Seems that it's heading from the vessel into Trinidad and Tobago territorial waters. Right now we're setting off to intercept the vessel.
Armed with the new equipment, Trinidad's Coast Guard now makes daily patrols to search for drugs on boats heading for its waters.
Bring your boat alongside and prepare to be boarded.
On this occasion, no drugs were found. But in the first 3 years of these patrols, almost 100 drug traffickers were arrested. However, with hundreds of miles of coastline to patrol, few doubt that the vast majority of drug smugglers are evading capture.
A major problem would be trying to pick up drug running vessels transiting this area. They're very fast, they run very low in the water, they're made out of wood so they don't reflect radar waves very well. Once they do get into our territorial waters, there are so many little coves and inlets that they can duck into to hide. You know, I won't say it's impossible, but it's very difficult to catch them in the act.
In 1994, Chadee was at his peak. His drug empire was continuing to expand, and his henchmen had eliminated virtually all rivals, making murder commonplace on the streets of Trinidad. But then he ordered the massacre that would eventually lead him to the gallows. It began when a petty criminal known as Mice was overheard outlining a plan to extort money from Chadee by kidnapping 2 of his teenage children.
Dole Chadee then ordered that Mice be murdered. He took the threat seriously. On the night that the murders took place, they met at Dole's farm where they planned how they were going to execute the murder. And as they were leaving, Joey Ramaya, one of Dole's right-hand man, his executioner, turned to Dole and said, well, what happens if we meet other people there? Whereupon Dole said, well then, kill everybody.
Silence hung over Puran Street in Williamsville this
where
morning.
they were made to lie on
after
the floor.
4 masked men
His sister
claiming
Monica
to be police
was also
officers.
put next to them by the gunmen, who then shot all 3 through the head.
My son, my grandson, my granddaughter, and my daughter-in-law was died. And I am hurt. I cannot say how much I hurt. I real hurt. And nobody could compensate me for that, but God.
The only survivors of the massacre were Mice's brother Osmond, 13, and sister Nemeti, 6, who had hidden in the next room.
Who do you think was responsible?
Dole Chadee. Dole Chadee was responsible for the whole show.
Though Trinidad was becoming used to murder, the country was in shock. The pressure was on the police to act. Detectives soon discovered evidence linking a car found abandoned on Chadee's estate to the killings. The police and the army were ordered to arrest the murderers and the man who had ordered the killings.
Chadee was at his Peparo residence, and immediately the first of his gang was arrested. He got word of it and immediately left his compound and was headed to the north coast of Trinidad. I would think as the crow flies, it's probably about 30 or 40 miles away. However, he was intercepted. No doubt, once he had hit the north coast, he would have been off to Venezuela, because he could have gone anywhere.
With Chadee behind bars, the police and army searched the land surrounding his ranch.
Over 20 kilos of cocaine was found buried in a barrel and covered with earth and straw. Near where the heliport area is, another 40 yards away, several firearms were found wrapped in plastic and cellophane bags with ammunition. And in another area, approximately 20 yards away from where we are now, a barrel was found beneath the earth, was approximately $1.3 million.
As the Babulal family was laid to rest, Trinidad's leaders were under increasing pressure from the public to take decisive action against the drug barons who were turning this tropical island into a bloodbath. The government's response was to ensure that Chadee and his henchmen were put to death. With Chadee facing trial for murder, Trinidad's new government began its fight back. The state confiscated his ranch and took back the land he had illegally seized a decade earlier. It was rebuilt as a rehabilitation center for drug addicts, and America's Attorney General was invited to witness its opening.
This ground on which we stand at one point was occupied by a notorious drug lord. You can look around and see the orchard, the buildings, and the helipad he built with blood money he acquired by feeding poison to our people and to your people.
Mr. Attorney General, you are a leader in the entire hemisphere in your efforts to deal with crime in a sensible, common sense way. If the world dreamed as you did, we would all be better off.
But seizing Chadee's ranch was only the beginning. The government's next step would arouse worldwide controversy. If the courts did convict him of ordering the murders of the Babulal family, the government would revive the death penalty. The police persuaded Clint Huggins, a member of the gang which carried out the murders, to testify against the man he called the boss. Chadee was about to be betrayed by a supergrass in his own ranks.
We knew that Dole Chadee would leave no stone unturned to ensure his demise. As a result, we had to make sure that we had extra security in place to take care of any such eventuality.
Huggins was given round-the-clock protection in an army safe house. Here he gave details to the police and to Major General Brown about the Babulal murders.
They were asking the young fella in the house, where's Mice? He said, well, Mice used to live there, but he doesn't live there anymore. Anyway, the description we got, he matched the description. So the guys went and asked her what she needed. So well, he both said to kill everybody. Cook went back and shot each of them in the head.
He gave graphic details of the murders, previous murders that took place. He gave details of corruption involving policemen. He gave details of corruption involving 2 or 3 magistrates.
Within 2 months, the army discovered that Chadee had offered a soldier $1 million bribe to kill Huggins.
The plot was that they would poison the water system to the safe house. We decided that we would go along with that plot, and we arranged to fake his death.
To make it look realistic, Huggins was given medicine to make him sick and muscle relaxant to make him lifeless. Then his body was removed by soldiers dressed as undertakers.
The press was alerted that Clint Huggins was dead, and his father supposedly identified the body. He was a very good actor, by the way. He was crying, he was interviewed by the press, and it was at that stage that the entire country became aware that Clint Huggins was dead.
An elaborate plot was then hatched to arrest the conspirators as the bribe was handed over.
We arranged that soldiers would play the part of vagrants in Port of Spain, and at the precise moment when the monies were being transferred from Dole Chadee's henchmen to the soldiers who were dressed as vagrants effected the arrest, and he was handed over to the police.
While the plotters were jailed for 15 years, Huggins was returned to his army safe house. Fatally, he became bored, and in early 1996, he decided to celebrate Trinidad's carnival. He gave his guards the slip and went to join the party.
He was a guy that loved his freedom. He felt he was invincible. And well, he didn't last 24 hours. He was murdered and his body was found in a burnt car on one of the highways in East Trinidad.
But the government had another weapon. A second member of the gang, Levi Morris, agreed to give evidence against Chadee. In return, his life would be spared. The trial was the longest in Trinidad's history, keeping the public gripped for 56 days. Chadee employed 12 lawyers, including Queen's Counsel from England. But with Morris's evidence crucial, all 9 were found guilty of the murders of the Babulal family. They were sentenced to death. A government that had come to power promising to hang convicted killers now had to live up to its promises. Ironically, the man with the power of life and death in his hands, the Attorney General, had long been an opponent of the death penalty.
When he was an ordinary politician, it made sense for him to campaign on human rights, on a human rights platform. Once he became Attorney General, and given the background against which the party came to power, the crime rate and so on, then it was the politic thing to do to promote capital punishment.
When I became the Attorney General, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And I felt it was my duty, I felt compelled that I had to move every obstacle in order to ensure that the public interest of Trinidad and Tobago was protected.
If the Attorney General was to succeed, he needed to overturn 20 years of his island's legal history. Though the death penalty had remained on the statute book, only 1 murderer had been executed in 2 decades. Lawyers kept people from the gallows by exploiting delays in a complex appeals system. The final court of appeal was the Privy Council in London. The law said that no one who had been on death row for more than 5 years could be executed. Because appeals took so long, the death penalty was usually commuted to life imprisonment.
The jury convicted him and the judicial process said that he was guilty. And we felt that unless the court said that he should not be executed, the executive arm of the state should do all in its power to ensure that the mandate of the people was carried out.
It became a cat-and-mouse game. The defense began a battery of appeals accusing the government of political motives, of breaching human rights. They said Chadee and his gang had not been given a fair trial. Each time the government answered back. Everything had been done according to the law, and they wanted all murderers to face the ultimate penalty. Finally, the cases arrived at the Privy Council in London, which ruled that Trinidad was entitled to execute under its own constitution. All the appeals had been completed within 3 years. On June the 3rd, 1999, Chadee and his gang members were read their death warrants. The first 3 were scheduled to hang at 6 a.m. the next day. 150 religious and political leaders, including Desmond Tutu, Jesse Jackson and John Hume, had made a last-minute plea for mercy, but the government rejected it.
त्र्यंबकं यजामहे सुगंधिं पुष्टिवर्धनं उर्वारुकमियं बन्धनान् मृत्योर्म उक्षे मामामृत्या.
The day that many people gathered here this morning thought would never come has. Dole Chadee, Joey Ramaya and Ram Kelawan Singh were all hanged this morning. Cipriani Batiste, prison's commissioner, says none of the men had any last words or tears.
The orders of the court have been carried out. He walked calmly to the gallows. He have made peace with his God.
The media celebrated, in a sense, the death by following the dead people, not only from the gallows, but right to the grave. You had this spectacle of pine boxes dripping with blood being put in unmarked graves. So blood and death for 3 days in Trinidad became a celebration, and it was quite appalling. Quite appalling.
The hangings provoked an international outcry, with the British government making a formal protest. But the people of Trinidad supported the executions. Polls suggested up to 90% backed the death penalty.
I think it's real good news. They should use Dole Chadee and these men as an example. I think justice was served there.
It's good to know, well then, justice can be done, because people are going in and doing things like that and getting off, scotch-free and things like that. I am happy about the decision, because it's time this country, somebody do something about cleaning up this country.
Despite the controversy, Trinidad's leaders insisted that the executions were the only way to protect the country from the drug barons.
The government did not have an option of just locking him up. Dole Chadee had the ability to run his criminal rings even from the prison. And one could have just imagined that having killed, that he would have been in prison running a drug trade in which he would have been able to continue shipping cocaine, which would not only go to America, but would go to England and to go to Europe, and which would be used to poison the children of England.
It's now a year since Chadee and his henchmen were killed. Supporters of the death penalty insist the policy has worked. The murder rate, once a national disgrace, has been cut by 30% from its peak. Some crimes like burglary, assault and firearms offences have also been reduced, while robberies have fallen by a quarter.
I think the signal which the government sent in the actions it took meant that drug barons knew. They knew that we had the political commitment that we were not going to be terrorized and we were not going to be afraid of them. They knew that we were prepared to prosecute them, and if convicted, we were even prepared to execute them.
But opponents say this is only half the story. Crime overall has hardly dropped, and although 63 people are on death row, only a handful of them are drug dealers. Everyone agrees that arresting Dole Chadee and smashing his gang produced a spectacular drop in the murder rate. But critics say that this happened purely because Dole Chadee and his men spent so long in jail awaiting sentence. There was no need to kill them. The government, though, is pushing through new ways of speeding up the legal process. The hangings will continue.